Dallas.
Alice,
So
it's is it cold there?
Dallas is beautiful. It's going to be about 50 degrees, sunshine. It's kind of amazing that Houston and New Orleans get snow and we get 40 degrees. So it's crazy.
Is
I don't know.
is that is that normal weather out there, Dole, for you guys?
This is, yeah. Houston, New Orleans, like I say, that's very abnormal down
Yeah,
there. But
yeah.
for us, and where are you located?
Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cold here. But it's our cold time. This is not unexpected. It's just colder than we every couple years. It'll we run through these streaks where it stays in the teens for extended time, and
Mhm.
this is one of those years. I tell you, last April we went down to Orange Beach, Alabama, and those guys got like 10 inches of snow. I can't
Really?
imagine 10 inches of snow. They can move sand down there pretty easily, but I don't know if they're equipped for snow.
That's nuts. That's nuts. Our we'll get ice and snow, but it'll come in and just kind of blow in and be nasty, and then it'll be nice. I mean, it's not anything like where you probably it's more consistent season. It'll kind of blow in, and then it'll be 40, then it'll be 20. And right now my wife is actually stranded in South Carolina because of
It
snow.
snowed there, yeah. It snowed.
She can't get out of
Myrtle Beach has got snow on the ground the
yeah.
other day. Somebody
She
sent
can't
me a
get
picture.
she can't get out of Savannah because of the snow. And it's like,
Yep.
wow, okay. All right.
Virginia, where I'm at, I'm over next to the Blue Ridge Dole, and Virginia is one of those places to where January is typically a cold month, but the rest of the months you have to look at the weather every day because it might be short sleeve weather, you might have sweatshirt, you might need a heavy coat. January is a consistent month, but the rest of the months it fluctuates, so you have to look just to see how you're dressing for the day. I've got on some thermals just because if I have to go outside back and forth to the car, it just makes it a little more comfortable because I always dress light anyway, right? So
Right. Right.
Virginia's a weird state. I have some friends. Well, my wife, she lived in Cleveland, and she said, the one thing about Cleveland, the Labor Day weekend, you put your jacket on and you don't take it off until Memorial Day.
I believe that from what I've
Yeah.
seen of Cleveland. Absolutely.
Man, I'm excited to get to know you. Let me introduce you real quick, so everybody knows
Sure.
who I'm shooting the breeze with today. Today on Second Chance Podcast with Jeff Robertson, we're honored to welcome Doyle Glass, an author, historian, and storyteller who's dedicated his life to sharing the powerful stories of resilience and redemption. Doyle is best known for his book Swift Sword: The Marines of Mike Three Fifths. How you say
Three
that?
five.
3-5.
Third Battalion, Fifth Marines.
That's your unit number. 3-5. The Marine. Let me get that right. The book is called Swift Sword: The Marines of Might 3-5. In Vietnam, which captures the courage and sacrifices of Vietnam veterans. His own life has been shaped by profound challenges and transformative second chances, and he's here to share us his journey, the lessons he's learned from veterans, and a glimpse into the exciting new historical fiction project. I'm excited, man. Um, I was just looking and reading different stuff, man. But you got some really cool. Yeah, it's like I was excited to talk to you just based on all the
Oh
stuff
man,
that you've been
thank you.
doing.
And
Yeah.
it's an honor for me to be here. I really appreciate it. It's
Um,
great.
I want to jump into the book, but yeah, the second chances, somewhere along the lines it tees you up for these great moments. But you've had your own significant challenges, Dole. Your father struggles with alcoholism, divorce, loss of your second wife. How does those experiences shaped your life and just your second chances?
Well, it's in. I'd say number one is my faith. My faith has gone through challenges. Like we say, when my wife passed away from cancer, uh, all those things that you mentioned. But my faith is much stronger now because of those things. That would be number one. Resilience in observing the Marines of Mike 3-5, for example,
Yeah.
going through some of those hard times, talking with them and learning from them I thought, if they could do what they did at age 18 and 19, well, I can handle what I've got to handle. And I need to not complain about it. I need to just take care of business because these guys went through, think, a lot worse than I've gone through.
Yeah.
So those are just two quick things, like the spiritual element, the faith element. Uh, all of this has really kind of helped me be in a better place as a man. Yesterday was my 63rd birthday, so I feel like you know everything's gone well till now. I mean, not well, everybody, all the challenges that we talked about, but personally, I'm in a real good space.
When you get to when you talk with those guys and when you just hit your birthday and you're still around to tell it, so there's something to be said for that, right? When you talk about faith and just your ability to be here, carry on this conversation with me, carry a little bit of what looks like health, right? I see you sitting down, but we have our health and we're breathing, we're upright, and those are some of those resilient messages that I preach all the time. Is if you're going to have ebbs and flows, and you're going to have good and bads, and all of those things. But ultimately, if you're still here, man, you're still here. You make a difference. You can move on. You can change your own directions. And yours took you to this book where I want to spend a lot of time with you. Swift
Mhm.
Sword, the Marines of Might 3-5 in Vietnam. Where's the interest for you come in to the Vietnam story? I don't. Did you serve there?
No, I'm not a veteran.
But
I didn't
yeah, I
serve.
thought your age was just. I thought age wise you were too young to have
Close.
been there. Yeah,
Too
yeah,
young. Yeah, too young. Yeah.
yeah,
It. Well, I grew up on stories of World War II, the Greatest Generation, and
yeah.
growing up, I heard about Vietnam and watched it on the news. My older brother, 3 years older, my mom was always concerned that he's going to be drafted, because, but
Yeah.
the conflict ended in 75. I was, what, 13 or whatever. So I was young, but only 5 years younger than a lot of these guys that served at the end. And I saw how they came home and how their treatment when they came home was abysmal. It was horrible. It's certainly not what their fathers who returned home from the World War II
Yeah.
faced. And for me, the interest in Vietnam came having that interest in World War II and growing up with Vietnam, and then realizing there really are no stories. There are really there's not a lot of factual matter out there about what these men experienced in real combat, like obviously with the Battle of the Bulge or the Pacific in World War II. We have a lot more books. On Vietnam, we have political movies where a specific director, the Deer Hunter or whatever, would give kind of their spin. Platoon, uh, all good movies. Don't get me wrong, but I was looking at, well, what did these men from them,
Yeah.
not
Story.
not not somebody else, what did they experience? And you talked about being around. I conducted most of these interviews with these guys, and I wrote 2 books on Vietnam. For Swift Sword, I interviewed probably close to 50. Roughly half of those guys are gone now.
Yeah.
A lot of that's cancer, Agent Orange that they walked through as a defoliant on Platoon. And when they're gone, their stories are gone.
Yeah.
So I feel very lucky that I was able to get a lot of those stories and get it down about 10 years ago so that we would have it. And the book that we're talking about is a second edition because when I wrote the first edition, my wife at the time was dying of cancer, and I had a small child. Couldn't really focus on the book that much, but wanted to finish it. I came back and realized the book's not finished. I was able to go back into the cloud, our email, and find all my transcribed interviews of guys who are no longer here. And I was able to go back and take their words and have them tell their story rather than me telling their story, which is the first edition. Second edition, you'll see in italics when you read the book the quotes from the veteran so that they could tell their story and really complete the work. So I'm really proud, really grateful that I was able to speak with them and that they trusted me with telling their story truthfully.
That's a big deal. So, for context, tell me I was I see we're 13 years apart. So when you go from I'm a 74 birthday, right? So Vietnam's
Right.
ending, and you're of age then. Why? Um, I have lived through all the Middle East, right? A little bit of Cold War, um, um, but then 100% of all our Middle East conflicts.
Right.
So tell me, tell me why that our nation soured on the Vietnam troops so bad. Do you know, or do you know
It,
why that?
sure, I can give you my opinion, what I've thought and read
I'd
and
love to hear it.
saw.
I'd love to hear
Yeah,
it.
I think there are lots of reasons. First off, in the fighting the Vietnam War, you're fighting with one hand behind your back because it's the Cold War. There's the threat of nuclear annihilation. You
Yeah.
didn't have that with World War II. World War II, you could fight a total war and not be afraid that an enemy that's in a corner is going to nuke you. So there was always that. We have to be contained in the conflict. But there were also a lot of mistakes that were made in strategy and tactics. For example, just one example, uh, Marines and soldiers would be told that they're going to take a hill, so they take a hill, and then they have to give it back. They have to get off the hill. World War II, we didn't see that, And I want to apologize. Dogs may start barking. I've got some men out here, but hopefully you won't hear it because I've got the AirPods
Yeah,
on.
yeah, I got you.
So you had a conflict that was extending out and going very long without a definite end game. You know, liberation of France, liberate it. That's an end game. There's no end game here. You're trying to maybe nation build, turn it back over to the South Vietnamese. It's not going well because the country doesn't really support what you're doing. Without making this too long, first rule of war is know your enemy. Know what makes them tick. Know what you can do and what you can't do and what they want, what you want. We didn't really know our enemy in Vietnam because, from their point of view, they just want to be liberated from other forces coming in. So you have this long conflict with no end game, and you've got a media cycle that reports every day and shows movies, which you didn't have in World War II. Uh, Atrocities that happen in all war are being reported. And all of this is kind of a really bad snowball for our guys trying to fight this war with all of this, the deck stacked against them. So
Yeah.
all that combined in people at home getting frustrated, guys not wanting to be drafted. What are we doing there? And suddenly, somehow, some way, our guys became the bad guys in all of this. And you had a lot of other young people come out and throw tomatoes, call them baby killer, and just treat them really, really poorly. A lot of those folks that did that, the hippies back in those days, I think are very apologetic now about what they did to our guys coming home, because those guys coming home were just doing what their fathers did in World War II, which is go fight fascism. And these guys were fighting communism, which in reality is a form of fascism.
Right.
So they're just doing what their fathers did. And the heroes of World War II, ticker tape parade, movies, all of that, and celebrating them is important. It doesn't necessarily show what war is really about, but our Vietnam guys didn't get any of that, and so hopefully that answered your question.
It did.
It's
It
kind of a
did. No, I appreciate that because our listener, I think our listeners probably gonna fall in mid 30s. Is where my highest demographics are, right? So they're behind me. And the one thing I noticed, Doyle, and I wanted to kind of give everybody a little overview. Um,
Can you hear those dogs? If you
Yeah,
can, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's okay.
Uh,
We'll pause for a second.
uh, yeah,
What?
that's very unfortunate. Sorry.
No, the one thing I was going to tell you is like, so all right, so they're a bunch of years behind us, which is because I could see that, and I'm glad they're here. But I also want to tell them kind of what was going on. But terms like fascism, all these they some of the terms we use they get used in other ways, and what meant something in Vietnam era is used in a totally way now. So in a different way, right? So um, and a lot of the I noticed that same thing because I love that Kennedy era. I do a lot of research. I mean, and I spent a lot of time, but I found Fletcher Prouty. He's got a YouTube. If you followed him, like he's very candid in his explanations of why we went from World War II. And it sounds like a lot of the our war machine really realized like, hey, we can make a lot of money at this and fund a lot of things. So we were just going and trying to find conflicts to get in the middle of, and our country didn't support that. And our most of our a lot of our people did because they were your older folks that had fought for freedoms. But then when you layer in, it's like, and I had that feeling like 2012 in my life of like, why are we still in Afghanistan? Why is this dragging on? Why are we what is going on? Are we making a difference now? So I think it's just I just wanted to give everyone some background on how things change and how we warm up to certain things and how quick we can cool off and different things like it. Just to give them some context on why our heroes and the people that live beside us and the patriots of the world, right? Of why we would kind of shun them coming back of just because of that agenda and how these guys got overlooked in so many ways, man. But all right, so you step into this role, Doyle. What inspired you to write your book? Obviously, a little bit of background here with your brother and being in that age, but like, what inspired you to write it and go down that journey with the Marines?
I was always been a history guy.
Yeah.
Grew up on the Alamo. Going to the Alamo as a little kid. Just mesmerized by that story. Being from Texas, that's huge. And so I was always a history guy, and then loved reading about World War II and the battles and those guys. And then when it came to Vietnam, there's a big empty gap. We want to forget that war. There's a chasm. And when I saw that, when you look at a book like Band of Brothers about a specific unit, there's very little about that in Vietnam. So it was really kind of a timing thing, meaning, all right, well, this is my time in life. I'm a history guy. If I want to do this, this is what I need to be doing because it's not being told. And as soon as I reached out to some of these veterans and heard some of these stories, I thought, this is the Alamo right here. I mean, the story of Swift and then Lions of Medina, my other book, both of those are, really our guys fighting against overwhelming numbers. That's the Alamo. That's the Battle of Thermopylae with the Spartans and the Persians. So the stories were immediately incredibly dramatic and engaging. And then the realization that nobody's written about this, nobody's going to. I'm going to have to go out and talk to these guys and get that story because it's not out there. We're talking 98% of the content for both of the books that I wrote is oral history, meaning sitting down like I'm doing with you
Yeah.
on a telephone with a cassette recorder hooked up to it. Our technology in 10 years has changed a
Yeah.
lot. And because that's the only way I'm going to get the content. And then when you add on the fact that a lot of those guys that I interviewed are gone now, it was almost very much a God thing of this is your moment in time. You want to tell this story, you better go right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Were they? Yeah, absolutely, man. So for folks, so we can close the gap now. now I can record Doyle and I's. It's being our conversations recorded. I can dump this over into AI. It'll give me a full transcript. I can create a short story off mine and his episode in a matter of minutes. Doyle's probably lugging around this huge or a recorder about this big and a tape about this big with a microphone. And so technology's definitely changed in how we approach that. Were these is these folks native to Texas? Are they from your area? Was it easy for you to catch up with them, or did you have to travel to get the story?
Well, that was
That you shouldn't have noticed any kind of hiccups other than us saying that we're going to change spots there. All right, so our technology allowed you to capture the story. um, what can you give us like? Just a process of creating it and that creative process. Did you, I mean, we talked the Second Chance podcast, right? Do you feel like you was giving those guys all guys, any ladies there?
sure. Well, I mean, survivors of those who
Yeah.
were, and then interesting you mentioned that one of the Larry Peters Medal of Honor recipient on Operation Swift, his sister was a nurse on a hospital ship. So, in the Vietnam story, the doctors and the nurses, and we've seen China Beach and those shows that were on a few years ago, but they deserve so much credit for saving lives of these guys. So yes,
Yeah.
definitely survivors. Mostly guys, most of the veterans. But
And
you talked about the creative process was something. It
yeah.
was it. I view it trying to put together a 3D puzzle, and you don't have the pieces,
Yeah.
and the pieces are in. You've got to go dig in sand for them, or like a needle in a haystack. You have to find the pieces. You have to realize which ones you're going to use and which ones that don't you're not going to use to fit the puzzle of what you're trying to build, and then you've got to put them in place. And on a battlefield, you've got, Jeff, if you're one sector of the battlefield, you've got your 6 to 10 feet in front of you and behind you and the guys next to you. You don't know what's going on behind you
Hmm.
or around the hill. So a lot of what we're talking about was simultaneous. So getting that time frame. When I'm talking to one veteran here, something else is going on over here. Uh, and when you're trying to uh, get the picture of the battle, it's can be really hard to make that clear for yourself and the reader. Plus, in this case, you've got air power and you've got a guy in a bird dog, Cessna, um, you know, flying over the battlefield, trying to help our guys on the ground with jets coming in to drop bombs to keep these advancing troops off of our guys. Our guys were probably outnumbered 3 to 5 to 1, ambushed on a little knoll in the Quezon Valley in Vietnam. So that creative process was something else, but luckily I had great veterans to help me out to tell me, okay, you got this wrong, or this is right, or this is this you don't need this. This is not appropriate or doesn't fit. Uh, and that's one thing I'm really proud of with the book is that we were able to put it together to where a reader can understand it. It's not easy read. It's a very hard read. It's tough. Uh, but then what I talked about, I spoke to you earlier about the guy's voice is coming in. It really kind of just, all right, we did it. We got it done right. So it took a long time,
Yeah.
but it well worth it
Can
by
you
far.
can you give us that high level overview? Give us that little bit of maybe the back of the book, right? Can you
Sure,
give
sure,
us kind
sure.
of an overview of the story of what the reader of kind of what those guys experienced, or kind of an overview of what your book's about?
Sure, absolutely. So first off, the overall context, we've got our troops supporting South Vietnam. We've got a country divided north and south. The north is communist. The south is democratic, but we really have a government that's kind of corrupt and is being propped up. This is where knowing your enemy is so important, because if we had kind of known more about what the average Vietnamese wanted or needed, we would not have been there like we were. But that's a different story. So on September 3rd, 1967, you had elections in South Vietnam for the president. And Marines were put out in patrol in the Quai San Valley to help the villagers get to the polls unharassed by the Viet Cong, which are the local guerrilla fighters, which a lot of them were anyway, fighting for the North Vietnamese. And so we had Marine units out to help that process, but we never had enough Marine or Army soldiers to cover a huge expanse like the Quai San Valley was. So you had a company of 160 Marines. In this case, you had two, Brava and Delta 1-1. It's a different battalion than the one I write about. They're out helping the villagers. They camp out at night and they are ambushed by the second NVA, veteran, very tough professional soldiers, basically are trying to annihilate them. And with the numbers that they had, several thousands against, maybe 300 troops with the two companies, they're in the process of doing that. Back at another hill nearby at 3-5, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, we've got two companies, Mike and Kilo 3-5, on duty as bald eagle companies. What that means is basically they're a quick reaction force. So Mike 3-5, who I write about, is one of these companies that's a quick reaction force. They get called up, guys, we're going now. Bravo and Delta 1-1 are in trouble. And Delta 1-1 had the nickname of Dying Delta. They seemed like they were always getting into trouble, always being ambushed, always taking casualties. So our guys are going, okay, get on the choppers. They call these choppers in. I can't remember the exact model, but they had been recalled for faulty rotors. So they're about to board choppers that could crash, but there's no time. You got to go quickly. They're also armed with the M16, which at this time in this particular model was defective. It kept jamming. And, in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, you've got a musket and a ramrod. Our guys would fight with an M16 that's supposed to, semi-automatic weapon, fire a lot of rounds. If you're being ambushed, the rounds get jammed. They have to take a cleaning rod and knock it out. A lot of guys get killed that way. And so they're armed with that. And they've been told that's because you don't keep your rifle clean. That's a falsehood. It was a manufacturing defect, but they're wrapping the muzzle of their M16 with plastic and over the top, and then sand's kicking up because of these choppers coming in, and sort of like, all right, here we go. So they load up on these choppers, and the company gets struck. And in the meantime, one of the men that jumps on the chopper, who had direct orders not to do so, was Father Vincent Capodanno, Navy chaplain, 45-year-old priest whose job, who had been ordered to stay back with battalion. He wants to be with his Marines, so he gets on the chopper. They go into the Quai San Valley. They land. Our commander, Lieutenant Murray, who's an amazing commander, earned the Navy Cross on this battle. He's one of the few people that had actual combat experience. None of his lieutenants, a company is 160 men, and you've got 3 platoons with that kind of builds it. So he has 3 first lieutenants in command of a platoon. Those guys are straight out of the basic school in the United States. They're in Vietnam for maybe a week or 2 weeks. They've had no combat experience, no training. Lieutenant Murray, usually a company is commanded by a captain. He was still just a lieutenant, but he had combat experience and had signed up on his second tour. Thank God he did, because he's the only one who really knew what combat was really like in Vietnam. So they landed in the wrong spot. They were put down because the original landing zone was hot. It was a lot of fire coming at him. So they landed they landed in a spot that he doesn't know where he is. Then he gets a call from another battalion commander barking at him, "Where are you? Where the hell are you? Get up here now." Because that commander's with this other company. So he has to improvise. What do I do? He gets his mortar team to fire a white phosphorus round on a hill that was their objective, where they're supposed to go. White phosphorus, the white smoke, he could see where he needs to be going. He does that, sees where his objective is, where he has to go, and they head out. And so they're going out, and we're talking a sunny day, a little cover, not a cloud in the sky. They're moving forward toward Brava and Delta's position to reinforce them to help them out. They reach this knoll and they overlook a very large rice paddy, and there's nothing out there. In the middle of the day at this time of year, you're going to have villagers toiling the rice paddies with the water buffalo. I mean, they're going to be doing their work. So immediately, alarm bells goes up. Why is it so quiet? Why is it so eerily quiet? Where are the villagers? Where's the water buffalo? Where is everybody? Nobody's there. Immediately, what's happening?
Yeah.
They get on this knoll. They start to go down into the rice paddy. You've got one guy, a young 18, 19-year-old by the name of Jack Swan, little guy who volunteered to be the point man for the entire company. That's the most dangerous position in the entire company. You're going to get shot first. But he had eagle eyes, comes down. He sees in front of him a bush move. He yells back at the squad leader, just saw a bush move. What do you want me to do? If it moves again, shoot it. He was armed with a grenade launcher. The bush moved again. He shoots it. All hell breaks loose. There's a whole field of camouflaged NVA on a bright day where you think you could see forever. And they're so well camouflaged that you couldn't see them. And then immediately they're being attacked. Basically, if they had gone into that rice paddy, if Jack Swan had not seen them, they would have been in a low position, easily surrounded, and think Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, they would have been wiped out. They were on a little bit of a hill. They were able to get some cover and get a perimeter, and the battle ensues. But they're in a desperate. So the rescue company, the quick reaction force, suddenly becomes the company in trouble.
Yeah.
And there we have basically kind of the Alamo battle I told you about.
um, what's one of the most profound lessons about resilience that you took away from writing this at this moment?
Personally, uh, well, from what I saw, and I've never seen combat. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm in my
yeah,
office, you know,
yeah.
to take a breath and figure out what's going on and try to keep your head in that moment to save lives. Because if you panic, if you let your fear, if you let your anger, whatever emotion take you over in whatever you're feeling at that moment, it's going to cost you or your loved ones. And in this case, all these guys. And that's where the leaders and those platoon leaders who had no combat experience raised up. Lieutenant Murray, commander, and then individually, I mentioned Sergeant Peters, who was a veteran at 20 as a squad leader, a sergeant. His leadership, they basically said, "All right, we've got a job to do, and we can't let these emotions and this desperation, and it could be anything, sadness, depression, anger, fear in this case." I mean, the number one reaction that I think everybody would feel would run away. I think of the old Monty Python movie, Run Away. Well, you can't do that. If you want to not only fulfill your mission, but ensure survival, if that's a possibility, you've got to get your clear head and start going through your training and what you know and rely on it to try to save the day here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, because listen, man, it's one thing, you drive a car pulls out in front of you, right? It's another thing to basically walking into that field that you're being baited in. And they didn't shoot just once. That all hell broke loose, in my opinion. And being someone who's been, I was in law enforcement, so I've been shot at. and as unnerving as that can be, in that in our world setting, just knowing what those guys experience, those oh crap moments of all these checklist of things of breathe, focus, remember your mission, all the stuff that goes into your, because you'll hear in law enforcement, military, you revert back to your training, all those things, but all that has to come together in a perfect little piece. No, it can't. You can't like when it's breaking loose. You can't have a little bit of it trickling over here. Whatever. It's all got to mesh just like that, in order for the mission, if not, you're gonna die or you're gonna be
You're gonna die.
captured. Or, yeah, man, that's
And it's a
definitely like it. That's definitely like that's exactly what I want. Like as far as like I'm like I want to go read the book now. Right? That's what I was.
well,
That's a
and to your point about having it all come together, that's why these guys were so fortunate that Lieutenant J.D. Murray, and he's just a lieutenant, okay, but he had combat experience that he risked his own life to re-up for a second tour of duty because he knew that his experience could save lives
yeah.
because of his experience. But he risked his life to do that. He gets put in command of the whole company. He immediately, okay, get on that hill. There's a bomb crater. He and his command team, which has all the radios, jump in a bomb crater because it's the only cover you've got. There are a few other ones around. The company's trying to control all of this. His platoon commanders come on the radio. We're being overrun. We're being shot at. We're being, what do we do? He said, knock it off. Knock it off. Report, platoon one. Report your position, platoon two. Platoon three. All right. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. Then he immediately gets on. We got to get air support. We've got to get jets in here because we're going to be overrun if we're not, to drop bombs on these troops that are going to overrun our guys because we're outnumbered 5-1. There are thousands out here. We just have a few hundred. He's got to get on the air with him, with the bird dog, that Cessna coming above. We don't want to bomb our own guys. You can't
Yeah.
bomb our own guys. You got to know where we are. Then he has to call in. All right, at one point it's not working. I've got to call in CS gas, tear gas on our own troops because that's the only way to stop them from invading. So 2 different times he calls in tear gas on his men. They've got to put in on gas masks. Most of those gas masks, by the way, were defective.
Yeah.
They didn't work. So these guys are getting it. So he's trying to do all of that, plus keep all the men in order. At one point, his platoon commander is coming up the knoll. Lieutenant Ed Combs gets shot with a 50 caliber round in his chest. He's down. He survived, but there's no commander of first platoon at the front. We've got first platoon, second platoon, third platoon, wings around, wagon around, like the old, the Indians coming around, that kind of thing in those old movies. So he jumps out of that
Wagon train.
crater.
Wagon train.
Exactly. He jumps out of the crater to go down to first platoon to grab the sergeant, Sully. You're in charge. Well, what if Lieutenant Murray had gotten shot and killed? There's no leader anymore of the
Yeah.
whole company. What's going to happen then? He since later said maybe that wasn't my best decision, but he was able to make it back. So to your point, it has to all come together, but then you've got to have a leader with experience that can try to manage 160 plus men that are about to be overrun. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
You asked again how was I lucky enough to come upon such an incredible story? It's amazing to me that it was never told. And there's in Vietnam and a lot of conflicts in the Middle East, like you spoken about. There's so many wonderful stories that we never hear about. And
Yeah.
for Vietnam, I was only able to talk about two in the two books, but there's so many other stories like that. So I hope this is kind of illustrates what those guys went through. But my hats off to these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably would be down with my head in the dirt, just wishing they'd all go away. So I have to really admire them.
Yeah, most definitely. It's one of those. it's easy to watch, and you're like, oh yeah, I can see it. But it's different when you're in. I never got to serve in the military, or I didn't because it wasn't. I came along at a time when it was drafting wasn't a thing, right? So, but just in the time I spent in public safety, it is. It's very. It's when you're in a situation. There's so many uncontrollable factors, and in their situation, there's a bunch of guys shooting back at them. Man,
Hmm.
such a great
And
story.
our guys were with these M16s that would shoot and jam. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Where's the cleaning rod?" There's a scene in the book where these guys are falling back and somebody leaves the cleaning rod out there. Where's the damn cleaning rod? And they got to go run out to get it so that they can unjam their weapon and fire. So they're firing one, jam, two, while they're being overrun. So it once again, I can't speak of enough admiration I have for these guys to overcome so many obstacles, both from the enemy, but on their own side, and to prevail. And obviously, the men did prevail, or they wouldn't be in this particular battle, or they wouldn't be around to for me to interview to tell the story. So,
Are they still around now? Anybody still living?
yeah, there are quite a few.
Oh, cool.
But I'd say about half of them are gone.
Yeah,
So I'm in regular contact with a lot of the guys, and they're always helping me update the book to make sure my facts are correct.
yeah,
So I'll be in the process of doing that. So, and it's been a real honor and privilege to know them and to call them friends. Um,
yeah,
that's been a real benefit in my life to just to have those relationships.
yeah, man. It is. It's absolutely cool. It's such a great story. It's things that we would overlook otherwise, and I appreciate you putting finding that interest in helping because I grew up. There was some Vietnam guys in my neighborhood. Like we all played army in the backyard, right? That's the closest I ever come. But those for someone like you to step in and tell that story and honor that the mission that not only did they overall serve, but this mission that they were on today is for just really, really remarkable. I'm glad you had interest in that. You also, as we wrap up here, you got a historical fiction book that you're working on. You want to share a little bit of details on that or where you're at with that process? And
Yeah, that's
um,
been a great story too. Now that's a little bit different because it's historical fiction, meaning it's based on a real life person, but it's more written in a novel style of like you'd pick up any novel. So the person, real life person, was a Frenchman named Robert Benoit, who was equivalent to a Lewis Hamilton of his day, meaning he was a Grand Prix champion in the 1930s racing. That he was a Le Mans champion. He was a executive for Bugatti, automobiles Bugatti in Paris. This is between World War I and World War II, so this is a World War II story. Before he was all of that, he was a fighter pilot in World War One. The dogfights and all of that. So he, at close to the age of 50, when World War II broke out, he found his country, France, overrun. I mean, like it'd be America being occupied by Russia or anybody. And he could have comfortably sat back and as an executive and a celebrity, honestly, and I'm too old to fight that kind of thing. But he chose to fight in a very dangerous way as a member of the Special Operations Executive, which was a British Fifth Wing Army, where they would drop you down into enemy territory. You would, meld with the populace and you blow stuff up. You'd see movies about French resistance blowing up railroads and that sort of thing. Well, this was one of those guys, except he's 50. His health is fine, but maybe not the best, and everybody knows him. So it'd be like, hey, Jeff Robertson, we know you. Everybody in the town knows you. All the Germans know you, who you are. Oh, I'm going to play secret agent and blow stuff up.
stuff up.
So it's not like you're hiding in the shadows here. So that's the story about him. told a different way. I did a ton of research in the British archives in France and all that to try to learn as much as I can about what this guy did. But his life was truly remarkable. But once again, the book is historical fiction or narrative nonfiction, so it's written more like a novel. Where, of course, Swift's Sword and Lions of Medina, that's straight nonfiction coming from those Vietnam veterans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When do you expect your next book to be out?
End of this year
Yeah, end of this year.
is the plan. Fingers
Um,
crossed.
what's your how do you want to wrap up here? Do you want folks to buy the book? You want them to reach out for you? Go to your website? What's the best way for what would you like for our listeners? How can they learn more about you or connect with you?
Well, first thing I would say for the listeners, you got any Vietnam veterans in your family or you see around, go thank them
Yeah,
because they're in their mid 70s. We honored our greatest generation, their fathers that fought in World War II in the 90s as well. We should have, but now it's their turn because they're in the fourth quarter of life. So, first thing, thank you to our Vietnam veterans and those who served and their families for, and then secondly, would be to thank all our veterans and our first responders like yourself for putting yourselves on the line so that I can sit back in my comfortable office. So thank you.
I
Thank
appreciate
our
it.
veterans, our first responders. And then if you want to know more about the book, go to my website, doyleglass.com, and learn more about me and my blog and about the book. And then, of course, on Amazon, uh, Swift Sword, you can find it there. Uh, Easily get it on ebook and paperback, and read the story and buy a copy for a friend. These stories are very important to our culture, to all of us as Americans. Like I say, I grew up on the stories of the Alamo, George Washington, the Delaware River, Battle of Gettysburg, all of these great stories. They're not being told anymore.
No,
And we, you say stories are not important. Well, no, they're vitally important because they're our national character, what we're all about, what those people who fought for us and died and bled so that we could have what we have, we need to thank them and be grateful for what we have and preserve it. And the only way we get that kind of perspective is to know what these guys too really, in the scheme of things, not that long ago. It's about 50 years, whatever it is.
yeah,
That's really a blink of an eye in the life of our nation and as a people. So read it, spread it. Thank your Vietnam veterans. Thank these guys for trusting me to tell their story. That's all I want.
that's a great way to end, my man.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate you bringing attention, keeping the attention going, and for all you do, man. I'm glad that you and I was able to connect today, and I hope that as you're approaching your release of your next book, you'll jump back in and you can give us some nuggets and give us a little bit of maybe a sneak peek of what's coming, and then we can help you get that out to the world as well. But I thank you, Don.
Absolutely.
Amazing
Jeff,
conversation. Thank you a lot.
love talking to you. This is great.
Appreciate you, brother.